Welcome back to Mindkind Podcasts. This is Dr. Jo North returning to our platform. Mindkind continues to be a reflective space for anyone who wants to stay sane in our demanding world. Our intention is to inspire, motivate, and inform people of all ages interested in mental health and well-being. I'll be drawing on 35 years of practice as a psychotherapist, and we'll be looking at research and therapy along the way and talking with other experts in the field so we can draw on their skill. If something affects the mind, we'll be talking about it. So let's get on with today's podcast. Hello, so good to be with you again. So this week, I want to talk to you about the importance of emotions in our lives and the relationship between emotional life and mental health. I'm going to tell you all about my research into child-parent relationships and understanding emotions in children. But then I'm going to translate that into how we as adults care for ourselves, give time for our emotions, support ourselves so that we get the best out of life through all the ups and downs that it's going to bring to us. And I'm really looking forward to helping you understand all of this. This week, we are thinking about the importance of our emotional lives. So this is the experience of energy in the body and mind. It's more inside ourselves, whereas our physical lives and our material lives affect us deeply and are part of our mind. Our emotional lives are very much an internal process, which become externalized and activated if we're working with ourselves carefully. So lots of information about emotions, but I was talking with a friend and colleague at dinner last night, and we were talking about our work in the field of mental health, about the vital importance of emotions. And what I wanted to share with you today was a piece of research that I did about 12 years ago now for my doctoral thesis, when I was writing about children who struggle with behaviour. And I want to tell you about this today because we were all once children and we all have an emotional child within us. And we all try to hide that aspect of ourselves because emotions aren't widely enjoyed in our social world. And I think that as we develop, we're going to get used to the idea of how important at least being able to acknowledge our emotions, to give them a little bit of time, to listen to them, to sit with them, and to translate them into necessary actions. Because emotions help us understand our needs and what's going on in our lives, especially there to keep ourselves safe. So if you can imagine, the first primitive communications of a baby are that the baby will yell and cry and make a noise when they want their parent to be present. And that emotional sound links to their need for safety and for proximity of a parent, for a parent to be close to keep them safe. So let's just follow that process a little bit so that we understand both children in families, because as you know, I'm very, very invested in families and their emotional lives, but also adults functioning in the world. So in those early days, what is great is if we have a parent who will respond to our cries and also respond to our other overtures as a tiny infant. So we learn within about 8 to 10 weeks how to produce a smile, and somehow we learn that everybody's delighted with that smile and they're going to respond, and we learn to use our smile. Equally, we learn to make those calls for attention from our parents through our emotions, and varyingly parents respond. More and more modern parents are more responsive to emotion, which is a good thing. One of the things that I wrote was the 5 R's model, which is that we receive, regulate, resolve, repair, and number 6 I ended up with actually repeat this piece of behaviour. So as a parent, we hear emotion from a child, but as an adult, we may hear emotion from an adult, and we receive that emotion. We have a choice. We can block it out if we wish, but if we're functioning and we're wanting to connect, we will receive the emotion. We then help a child or an infant or indeed an adult, to regulate that emotion. So, to make sense of that emotion, give meaning to that emotion, understand what is going on, what is the need, what is the call from inside. And then the third R is the resolve. So, what is it we need to do to put that in place to regulate and calm that emotion? So if it's a fear emotion in a child who perhaps is imagining a monster in the room, which is very, very common in childhood, we would help to resolve that by helping the child understand that the room was clear of monsters and that children are often afraid of monsters. And in fact, there are no monsters walking around in the world right now, and that parents are there to keep the child safe. And when I refer to parents, I also refer to carers and parents of all family types. So we resolve and we repair, and we keep repeating that behavior. And we might repeat it 10 times a day if a child is going through an insecure phase. And then we would get into a routine where that child would think, oh, this is good. If I have fear, or I have upset, or I have distress or anxiety, I make that known. And when I make that known, somebody will respond and I will get a soothing result. As a child sees that as part of their life routine or their familiar pattern of behavior, then they start to lock that inside themselves. And we call that the internal working model, that the model of life inside the child's mind is it's pretty good. Life can get tough, but somebody will come. And we actually call that attachment security, which I've talked about in my book, Mind Kind, Your Child's Mental Health. If I'm talking to adults listening and you are wondering, okay, so how do I comfortably think about emotions? I think the 5 R's or the 6 R's model, if you count the routine that you get into, is a very, very helpful model for yourself. So whereas parents are receiving and regulating a child's emotions, you for yourself can do that. So something's eating away at you and you don't quite know what it is. And I would say alongside that, mood as well, because mood is very much the precursor or the culture of emotion. And so I say to people, don't ignore that mood. Just give it 10 minutes. So receive that mood, regulate that mood, resolve and repair the mood, and then repeat. And if it's something difficult, you're going to be going regularly around that cycle of behavior for yourself. For example, if you've suffered a bereavement or a separation in a relationship or a traumatic incident, you don't employ those behaviors and then find it's all over. That's not the nature of the human mind. The nature of the human mind is to want to reflect until things are completed and a cycle is completed. So there are long cycles of emotional troubledness, especially if you've lost somebody or you've been going through some kind of trauma, or you've lost a job or had somebody treat you badly. What we need to employ is the ability to be able to tolerate our own emotions and live with them comfortably and embrace them if we're going to survive and get through and be our best selves. And of course, you're going to make a choice about whether you want to share those emotions. Now, there is no doubt that talking about these things with someone is going to be very helpful. So, venting emotions is a very positive thing to do. Uh, but you need to make sure that you choose the right person, because some friends and colleagues may not be so good as others at listening or being bothered. And then that might increase your isolation if you're not feeling very good. So if you haven't got a therapist, you might be choosing someone you love and trust to say to them, can I just talk with you about what's going on for me right now? I need to just vent some of these thoughts in my mind and these feelings that are going on. So one model of psychotherapy that's been around for about 60 years is transactional analysis, developed by Eric Berne. It's used by therapists all over the world. And it's a way of thinking. So that's what models of psychotherapy are. They are conceptualizations and ways of thinking about the mind, which is quite different, really, to how we think now, because in modern terminology, we think very much in terms of mindfulness. But the conversation I'm going to have with you goes through very modern ways of dealing with emotions, as well as some of those slightly dated but very valuable to us. So Eric Berne referred to the emotion state as the child in ourselves, which isn't an insult. It's just a sort of way of understanding. It's quite a nice way of understanding, because it is the way that the brain and body work. And but perhaps we might devalue emotions if we think of them as only something for children, because that's not the case. And Berne was trying to make the brain more understandable, and he referred to his three-part model of the brain, talking about emotions or the child, the everyday ego as the adult brain, and then he referred to our values as, or the superego, as the parenting brain, or if you like, the this aspect of the brain that makes rules like shoulds and musts, and this is what you have to do. That's actually very useful, and it's actually him picking up on the Freudian model of the brain. It's helpful to remember that we are meant to affect each other with emotions. If we have an emotional state, it is likely that it will affect others who are in our near vicinity or those who are close to us emotionally. And so this is a rule that seems to get forgotten in our busy information-based world. We forget to use emotional material, and we forget that it affects us, and especially those that are close to us, including our children. So our primitive communication may be ancient, but it's incredibly intelligent and very, very immediate. And they have developed so that we're made that we can read each other at a sensory and affective level. And this in fact is happening at every moment in your lives. And it's why nowadays we focus so much on the here and now, the felt sense that you are experiencing. So just right now, here and now, you probably are receiving the tone of my voice and perhaps the intensity with which I want to convey information. And in that way, you are affected by the emotion in my mind that wants to relate to yours. And so it's often really helpful to step back and ask yourself, what emotion is affecting me in the present moment? What felt sense do I have? Or if you're in a meeting, you might want to ask yourself, what state am I experiencing in this meeting? And just factoring that in to your life experience. Those around you will sense your states, especially your children and your close partnerships or friendships. People will sense anxiety, fear, or stress, and they will sense depression and negative emotions such as hostility and disgust and rage. And then they will be receiving and perhaps wanting to communicate with you anyway about that. And I think the rule of thumb is that what is going on for you is likely to affect those around you. And you may want to consider at what level you need to talk about that, or at what level you need to regulate that. But particularly of most importance, and in modern psychotherapy, we think of how are you going to be able to tolerate yourself? Nobody actually is having to tolerate your emotion more than you. So, how are you going to tolerate, consider, and manage yourself and your own emotional states? Some parents are fearful that their children will not become independent. They think that their children should learn to deal with themselves and self manage quickly. So there may be some anxiety in parents or even in adults that paying attention to emotional states will make the child too soft, or that they will then become too dependent and won't be able to stand on their own 2 feet, which is a common phrase from the last generation. But there's no evidence at all to suggest that supporting children or supporting friends or supporting one another is going to make us weak. There is, however, plenty of evidence to suggest that supporting children with their emotions will help them become emotionally secure and well balanced. And equally in adult life, in partnerships, help your partner in life to feel secure by your constant, considerate help and support. When we looked at elements of security in attachment, we name emotional literacy and emotional openness as two obvious aspects of self security in life. So, if you can be more emotionally open and more emotionally literate, you're likely ultimately to balance your ship and feel more secure in yourself. So Alan Sroufe, professor, undertook a 30-year study of child development from birth to adulthood at the University of Minnesota. This was way back in 1990s. And he found that children who are supported are likely to be more secure in their lives. And the result of his 30-year study was that support is a wonderful, wonderful thing in life to make us feel good. So I would urge you and say, if you are having a struggle, seek the right support, whether it's online, whether it's through groups, whether it's through some mental health charity, whether it's with very good friends or through psychotherapy or counselling, is going to be a quicker way to get through. Having said that, many, many people get through very difficult times without any necessarily focused emotional or mental health support. And that's because we have a built-in resilience and we can do this. We can get over difficult things. We are actually stronger than we think. So another finding was from the work of Peter Fonagy at the Anna Freud Institute and at University College London. And he refers to this whole experience of being mindful of our emotions as mentalization, or the ability to think about states of mind within ourselves and others in order to give them meaning and make sense of them. And it's our ability to make sense of our emotional and mental states that will identify our ability to cope and manage in life. And it's likely to support not only emotional well-being, but also better outcomes in our mental health. So mentalization is a modern term in terms of psychotherapy, and like some of these terms, they're sound a little bit complicated, but basically it's the thinking about our emotional lives. And this is where we try to think about the states of ourself as well as others. And we're trying to anticipate and understand what is in the mind of others. And this is all a good part of our survival instinct, that we are interested in the minds of others. And it's a good way to read an environment, but a good way to keep ourselves safe. If we know what's in the mind of another, we know what is likely to happen next. But on the other hand, we can misread, and sometimes it's a good opportunity to be able to ask very open questions about what is going on. Much anxiety centres on trying to read what is in the minds of others, and child anxiety is often about trying to read what it is their parents are wanting from them. And that's why I can't stress enough the importance of great communication with children. When we're talking about emotions in adult mental health, child mental health, and family mental health, we are seeking really to have our emotional states accepted by ourselves and by others. And when we encounter emotions in ourselves, we are encouraging people to be able to say, oh, that's me, that's what I'm thinking, that's what I'm feeling, that's what's going on inside me. So we're looking for very deep acceptance, and we know that acceptance of states is a really important skill in parenting, but also in life. And acceptance is an emotional state in itself that brings a pacification to the mind and literally regulates us. So if we're fighting or rejecting an emerging emotion or an emerging experience, we can't really have any peace. But if we are able to deeply say to ourselves, look, okay, there's something difficult going on, I'm going to let that be there, we might do better with that. So if we're learning something new and that makes us feel anxious, if you can accept that anxiety as a natural part of the learning process, is much more likely that you'll be able to soothe yourself and then get your mind ready for learning, because it's for sure we don't learn well if we're anxious. The state of acceptance and tolerance makes everything possible, even very difficult things. So most psychological states are worthy of our attention, and it is part of the human gambit of life. And it applies to both negative and positive emotions. Now, we're very good and we love to engage in positive emotions, but when it comes to negative emotions, we usually have a struggle, and this is where all of the problems start to arise. So, I've already talked about death and loss. If we lose a loved one, we very clearly get put into a state of distress, regret, and grief. And this can continue for some years until we've readjusted to life without that loved one. The final stage of a grief process is named as acceptance of the loss. And there's recognition that there's nothing that can be done. We can't fight death or loss. And so there is time for resolution when the acceptance has been achieved, but this might take a long time. And someone, a child or an adult, might need a lot of support during that process, lots of ups and downs, lots of memories, lots of reflections, lots of recollections, and the heart doesn't let go very easily. Our mind might say we need to get over this, but our heart remembers. So everything has to line up before we can be deeply accepting. And this doesn't all happen at once. And it takes a lot of time to arrive at this point. We have evolved to experience a whole range of emotions. And unfortunately, I meet a lot of people who get a little bit trapped in the sense that they are entitled to go through their lives and should only ever feel happy or contented. And in fact, life isn't like that. There's a wonderful book called The Happiness Trap, which I recommend to most of my clients, written by Russ Harris over there in Australia, who's very involved in acceptance and commitment therapy. And in The Happiness Trap, he tells us that, we can't be happy all the time. You are going to experience highs and lows and undulation, just like sort of, I always think it's a bit like the hillside here in Devon, the ups and downs of life. You're going to feel, moderately okay at times. You're going to feel good enough at times. You're going to feel contented at times. But, happiness, enjoyment, great big surges of adrenaline. We can't be pumped up all the time. It's actually not good for us. It's not good for the brain. We need downtime and rest. So I think for a kick-off, if you're somebody who wants to really get hold of regulating emotions, I strongly suggest that you hold in mind the entire range, this beautiful cycle of emotional life that we have, from despair and hopelessness to sadness, to anger and rage, to fear, to surprise and shock and disgust, as well as the happiness and joy of being engaged. And then there's that wonderful gift called gratitude, where we just simply feel grateful for this incredible cycle of life in which we are all involved. So I would say to you, for a kickoff, if you're trying to balance out your children and you're trying to balance out yourself and you're wanting to tackle your own balance in life, you need to start thinking about this whole beautiful range of emotions. And as Russ Harris says to us, the sun can shine in the sky, but then there can be a thunderstorm, and then there can be a whole load of wind rushing, and then there can be a tsunami, and then there can be, great big waves crashing to the shore, but equally we can have a heat wave. That's how our emotions are as well. So there are several emotions where people get stuck, and one is fear. And fear is just a sense, and you have to check out whether fear is, as they say, FEAR, false evidence appearing real. We can hyper exaggerate our emotions. They can appear bigger than they actually are. A certain amount of caution and anxiety and carefulness about life is a very, very good thing. But if that comes blowing up and hyper exaggerated, then you have things like phobias emerging, and people are completely frozen and can't do anything. So I would say it's perfectly natural to feel some fear in your day, some fear when you wake up in the morning about whether or not you can cope, some fear about perhaps even doing things like getting on a crowded bus, or, some level of anxiety, and just notice that sort of undulation with fear. Fear is there just to keep you checking stuff and keep you safe, and your brain will keep checking in with you on that. Watch out that it's realistic. And when we're helping children with fears, equally, we have to help them. Their fears get very big and very overwhelming, and we have to help them put that in place. So fear is one that can freeze us. I think anger is another one that can freeze us in several directions. And Russ Harris would talk about whether we move forward in life and we're feeling active and engaged, or whether we are avoiding and moving backwards. And he's always talking about a choice point of moving into life and engaging, or moving out of life and getting stuck or hitting a roadblock. And really what we need to be doing is evaluating all the time that, we have this sense of vitality, that we can cope is a wonderful thing. That's not the same as staying happy all the time, but a sense of ability to cope because we keep engaging thoroughly with life is a wonderful thing. And our emotions are there to help us do that successfully, not to hinder us. So I think people are often afraid of emotion, because it's really classified as quite a negative emotion, but actually it's a beautiful emotion to keep you safe. If you're angry about something, it's probably because it matters. And in acceptance and commitment therapy is one form of therapy that I work with. We say, if emotion's showing up, it's because something matters to you. And so therefore, let's just have a little listen. Let's take some time around that. If, say, for example, I'm angry because somebody hasn't paid me for something, that would be a perfectly understandable thing to notice, that perhaps I have been sold short of something. At the same time, I don't necessarily need to approach someone with anger, because they may very well have forgotten to pay, and we've all done that. And I might need to take note that I'm not happy about that, and then approach someone and say, oh, I wondered if you've forgotten. So we have to measure, we have to get that thing regulated, we have to get the whole thing put in good shape. And that's the piece. Making that plan that makes those emotions very meaningful and very powerful. And if you watch anger, so, some people become terribly unassertive and terribly afraid of their own anger, because it's very, very all-consuming, and it can make us feel, oh no, just about to go and do something terrible, and go, I'm so angry, I'm going to hurt someone. But we don't have to act on these emotions, and we rarely do. Most people are in control, and they'll calibrate that feeling with what action they're going to take. And it's a big ask. It's all part of our executive mind at work, our ego measuring, calibrating, and doing us big favors and doing things the right way. And many people that I'm working with are learning to do that. And it's a great joy to say, hey, let's just calibrate this. Let's get it right for you so that you don't go mess up and, you go and hit someone when they actually haven't done anything, but you just got angry. And that's a very common feature of modern life, is people having to come to someone like me and say, oh, I need to regulate this anger. And I have to say, look, anger's not bad. It's just that you're acting on it. Let's get you thinking about it. Let's get you mentalizing and getting the measurement right on this. And I know that many people, many wonderful people, have ruined their lives with their reactivity. And I'm not judging reactivity because we are all prone to that. There's many people who will tell you about my reactivity at times that, we all need to give that some compassion, give that some tolerance, make sense of it, give it meaning, and see how we want to respond accordingly. And again, bringing it back to parents and children, if you imagine the massive task that we ask children, in a classroom full of children or other children all day doing probably lots of annoying things, how much are they having to learn all of these things all the time? It's a very big ask. So anger's there, fear is there. And if you master those two, then I think you probably are going to start really understanding yourself. Another emotion that I always find very fascinating and incredibly productive is envy. And you find little children might find that start to think, oh, they don't feel very comfortable because they envy their friends because they've got better things. I always think envy is a beautifully productive social emotion if you use it in the right way. And I say, many adults don't even admit they're envious. And I think an emotionally healthy person will be able to say to themselves, God, I actually feel really envious. Rather, you don't have to hate the person because they've got something that you want. But I always say, if you're envious, then what actions are you going to take to make sure you get the right thing for you? It's something in you wanting to look a certain way or earn a certain way or learn a certain way or whatever. There's something in that for you that you can learn. So I think these things are so productive, and we can resign all of these emotions to the closet and put a padlock on the door if we want, or we can just listen to ourselves and we can say, I'm going to give that some time and I'm going to understand myself and be compassionate. And then when you start to do this, you're on the road to your mindfulness. You are mindful of what is going on for you. And when you're willing to be that person, you stand so much more chance of being an evolved, courageous, and very productive person, skilled with your emotions. At the same time, you're going to have the ability to say to yourself, I mess up. I get that totally wrong sometimes. And oh dear, do I have the capacity to say sorry if necessary? Do I have the capacity to forgive myself? Do I have the capacity to forgive others? Am I going to be able to let this go and move on and learn the next thing? So that's where we are. Been great to talk to you today about the most powerful, important aspect of being human and about our inner lives of emotion. I'm going to be talking to you very soon and talking with other experts about how we can manage ourselves, how we can regulate ourselves, and how we can get to grips with this incredible job of being human. See you soon. Thank you for listening. Check out the next episode on our platform. Don't forget, I'm a Doctor of Psychotherapy, not medicine or clinical psychology. My expertise lies in the field of applied psychology through psychotherapeutic models of practice. This podcast is not intended for diagnosis or treatment of any kind. If you are concerned about your mental health, do consult your doctor, who will guide you. If you are ever in a mental health crisis within the UK, dial 999. In all other parts of the world, check your mental health facilities or turn to someone who will support you.